You ever stand so still in a crowd that people forget you're even there? That's how it started for me. Outside that iron gate, sunlight crawling up my back, the ache in my leg reminding me, with every passing minute, that I didn't really belong anywhere anymore, not here, not home, not even in that uniform I'd pressed for the 100th time just to remind myself what I used to be. They told me, "You're not on the list, sir," like the clipboard in that young man's hand could erase a lifetime. That patch on my shoulder, the one stitch crooked with Margaret's name, yeah. She made that herself, weeks before cancer took her, and maybe the seams were uneven, but it was the only thing I ever let touch that sleeve. That patch was a promise one nobody at that gate understood. The guards barely glanced at me, their voices flat, all protocol and posture. "This is a closed ceremony, military funeral. You need clearance to step inside," like they practice saying in the mirror. I wasn't there to cause a scene. Hell, I didn't even expect to get in. I just wanted to see an old friend off the right way. Patrick Whitmore, General Whitmore, to the crowd, but to me, he was the kid I dragged out of a burning Humvee in Basra, the one who swore I'd never have to buy my own beer if we made it home. 34 years gone in a blink, and there I was, separated by a gate, watching flags ripple and officers rehearse, stuck on the wrong side of memory. You know how people walk past a statue without seeing it? That's what it's like being old at one of these things. People in dress blues flashed their credentials and glided through the gate, barely a nod my way. A photographer pretended I was invisible, turned his lens the other direction, as if catching me in frame might break the narrative. I stood my ground anyway. My badge, a relic from decades ago, faded and laminated, was useless now. "Not valid anymore," the guard said, looking uncomfortable. "I served with General Whitmore 34 years ago." I told him. "Didn't matter. If you're not family or on some damn list, you're a ghost." Wind rattled the flags and lifted the edge of my coat, revealing the metal joint in my leg. Prosthetic government issue, not that anyone cared. I pressed it down and kept my back straight, boots together, just like Margaret would have wanted. Then the whispers started, officers laughing under their breath, young soldiers tossing jokes around about Grandpa out of the museum. One of them pointed at my patch. "What's that? A tribute or something?" And I just tucked my hands behind me, flesh and metal side by side, and stared ahead. They meant nothing by it. That's almost worse, the carelessness, like your whole life is some museum exhibit they can giggle at before scrolling TikTok again. The ceremony started inside the anthem, drifting on the breeze, making me stand even straighter, even though nobody was watching. The honor guard presented arms. Rifle volleys cracked through the morning, and all I could do was listen. That's when those boys circled back. One, bolder than the rest, looked at my patch and said, "Margaret, she your wife? She make that? Looks like it came from a pillowcase." He laughed, but it faded when I covered the patch with my palm and met his eyes. I didn't glare. I didn't have to. That moment, he stepped back. Nobody else noticed. Officers turned away, pretending it wasn't happening. That's how it goes, most times. I sat down on a stone ledge, me legs stiff, hat off, cap resting beside me, the metal of my prosthetic leg cold against the concrete. I unclipped that patch, smoothing it out on my lap, hands shaking a little, pressing the wrinkles flat the way Margaret used to do with Sunday shirts. Those stitches were a language all their own, her hope in every thread, and I finally understood it, years too late. Folded it up, pressed it to my chest, no cameras, no applause, just me and the memory. That's when I saw a Hyman officer, captain's bars on his chest, crisp uniform, bronze star glinting. He'd been watching, quietly, respectful. Didn't say a word, just turned and walked to the command tent. I stayed where I was, still as the trees shading the bench, just listening to the muffled speeches and ceremonial commands float over the field. Out here beyond the gates, it was just wind and memory. After a while, I stood again, slow but steady, placed my cap back on my head, and stared through those iron bars, straight at the flag-draped canopy where Patrick lay. I thought about that night in Basra, bullets snapping overhead, Patrick's voice cracking not from pain, but from disbelief. "You shouldn't have come back for me," he'd said. "I didn't," I whispered back. "Margaret told me not to leave anyone behind." Funny how promises stick, even after everyone's gone. With nobody watching, I raised my arm, a clumsy salute, stiff from the prosthetic, but every bit as real as it had been 30 years before. Not for the generals or the crowd, but for the man I'd promised not to let be buried alone. Then, suddenly, something changed a ripple in the ceremony. The captain who'd been watching me earlier stepped into the command tent and spoke quietly to the man at the center, General Christopher Doyle, a legend in his own right. He listened, nodded, handed off his binder, and strode out of the tent, ignoring protocol, cutting straight across the grass toward me. The whole crowd started whispering. Cameras turning. Nobody could figure out why the highest-ranking officer at the funeral was walking away from the action, toward some nobody at the gate. He stopped inches from me, looked me over, really looked not at the uniform or the metal leg, but at the man standing where he wasn't supposed to be. He reached out, not with command, but with reverence, and said, "I heard you wouldn't come, but he made me promise if you showed up, it had to be you." I asked, "Had to be me for what?" Doyle turned, nodded to his aide, who brought over a polished wooden box, the urn, Patrick's remains. He wrote it into his final directive. Doyle said only one man could carry him to rest. My hand shook as I took the urn, heavier than I expected. The whole field went silent, soldiers old and young standing at attention, civilians holding their breath. Together, shoulder to shoulder, Doyle and I walked through the gate, down the central path. No band, no speeches, just the hush of reverence. Halfway down, I saw those young soldiers again, the ones who'd mocked me before. Now they stood rigid, heads high, and as I passed, the bold one whispered, "Sir, I'm sorry." I nodded. That apology weighed more than all the medals on that field. At the altar, I placed the urn above the folded flag, took off my cap, and rested my palm over the wood. Veterans scattered through the crowd rose to their feet, saluting, hats off. One man standing shaky with a cane, a woman whispering, "Welcome home." I blinked, maybe the wind, maybe not. Taps rang out, the rifle salute cracked the air, and then it was done. Doyle leaned over and said, "I know you never wanted recognition." I told him it was never about being seen. He just nodded, but some things deserve to be remembered. When everyone left, a small group gathered at a plaque under an old oak tree, newly planted. It read, "In honor of Staff Sergeant Elias Rowe and Margaret Rowe." Because honor is not given, it's carried. No podium, no statue, just the truth. I knelt, dug a shallow spot, and buried Margaret's patch beneath that tree, a gesture no one saw but meant everything. Doyle stood beside me. "They'll come here," I said. "They already are," he replied. I walked away, no speech, no wave, just the sound of gravel under my boots. This time, when people looked, they didn't stare, they stood. If you believe dignity matters even when nobody's looking, drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Is honor something you're given, or something you earn and carry alone? Let's talk about what it means to remember, together even if it's just in silence.